Well, another fine day of recording done. Oh, let's look at the grimoire and see what else could possibly be going on. What else to review? What else to? Huh? There's nothing here. I don't like that. There's nothing in the What? What other movies, grimoire? What other things could I possibly do? We've had a little bit of fun right now. Guys, gals, and other pals, welcome to BigGrim versus the 100 Movies Bucket List. This is when I'm going to look at the 100 Movies Bucket List and run the fuck down to see if they deserve to be on this list or if they don't. And we're gonna start things off with honestly one of my personal favorite movies. This is a movie that's very close to my heart and deserves a lot of credit, gets a lot of credit, but don't know if it does or not. We're going to talk about The Shawshank Redemption. The Shawshank Redemption came out in 1995, and it was starring Tim Robbins, Morgan Freeman. It was also written and directed by Frank Darabont. Now, upon looking into this movie, I've noticed it didn't get nominated for anything at the Academy Awards. I'm sorry, it didn't. It did get nominated, but it didn't win, which I felt was a little disturbing because I personally consider this one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. The movie also just set the standard for future prison movies, I guess you could say, future prison dramas. And I'm getting ahead of myself over here. So let's start at the beginning. In the beginning, we first see the character Andy Dufresne, played by Tim Robbins, being sentenced to 2 life sentences for murder. He's sent there to Shawshank Prison, where he runs into Red, played by Morgan Freeman. These 2 characters' chemistry and connection will be just mind-blowing for this entire thing, as some will see this as, how I like to view it, as the future Frodo and Sam. Like, you can tell the friendship that these 2 just radiate, and it truly is honestly like a beautiful thing. Up until Frodo and Sam, these 2 were the definition of best friends and best friend goals. The movie continues on with these 2 warming up to each other. Andy dealing with prison life, the very few positives to the very many negatives, with basically fending himself off from, let's call them bullies, because I don't want to say the bad thing, fending himself off from bullies somehow, some way, and just dealing with life up until he finds out that Red is that guy that can get anything for anyone. He manages to pick up an item for himself in the form of a rock hammer. Seeing as he has nothing but time now, he's just gonna fill around with some rocks. He sees in his prison cell. Also, I just want to point out that there are no timestamps in this movie. Like, you actually do have to keep up and know what is happening in what time period. There is no 2 years later, 3 years later, in what year. You get all that from Morgan Freeman in pure narration. So you need to, this is not a movie to have as background noise, because if you do and you're like, oh, I can understand in the background, no, you cannot. You need to pay attention to this movie, and it deserves to be paid attention to. 2 years go by since Andy goes into the prison, and he gets his rock hammer, and he starts to see that there are certain names in here. So he decides to add his name to his prison wall as well. As he's adding it, we do manage to see in a later scene why Andy doesn't technically finish his name. But in the next scene, we realize, you know what? I want a poster. I want a poster of a beautiful woman in my cell. Oh, it's going to take a couple of weeks there, Andy. It finally does happen, and we see the reason why Andy has so many beautiful girls in his room in the form of a poster, where just by seeing Andy at first, he is just a cold motherfucker. Like, he just has barely any emotion just by looking at him. Morgan Freeman puts it the best way possible, that a stiff wind looks like he could just be blown over. Like, he is a scarecrow, essentially, throughout this entire movie. And he shows personality to the ones who really get to know him, and the ones who just want to get to know him, and the ones who is close to him. That's when he shows his personality, which is a very nice guy. Tim Robbins, I think, plays his role immaculately, and he just incorporates just that cold feeling. The judge in the first scene tells him that he's a very cold man, and you can see it for a second, albeit the judge himself looks to be a cold man as well, but that's neither here nor there. So we continue on with the movie with just... There's one character that I need to bring up in this movie. For the ones who have read the book, we'll see a completely different iteration of this character, that being Brooks. In the movie, Brooks is this very harmless-looking older gentleman, has arthritis in both hands, and is just working at the prison library while also raising a baby crow. Now, you see him have connections with the other characters and everything, but towards the middle to beginning middle of the movie, Brooks, we find out, is finally being let go, and he has served his term. We also find Brooks having a knife to a fellow inmate. We find out he actually wants to stay in the prison, and this brings up a sore subject with a lot of people now, that being institutionalized. When you just get used to a certain way of living for so long that any kind of change that comes through it is immediately met with just bad images, just all negative kind of energy around it, and something no one really wants to worry about. No one wants to have that kind of problem. But Brooks, now you have to figure, has been living the same life essentially for 50 years. Red even says in the movie that in prison he's a decent man, he's an educated man. Not many people are educated in the prison walls. He has a job, he knows how to do it, he is a pinnacle to his own society. Outside the walls, he's just another dumb schmuck. That's it. He even says in the movie, when he was a child, at first he saw an automobile and he was so excited about it. After he's released, he's almost run over by one. They're everywhere now, and it's a lot for him to catch up. And for this character in this movie, unfortunately, he decides to take his own life after writing a letter to his friends back in Shawshank. Now, I keep making this referral between the movie and the book, because in the book, Brooks is a completely different character. Murders his wife, murders his kid, does not deserve any kind of love whatsoever. Have I read the book? No, I haven't. That's on me, but I should actually read the book, and I do want to. We continue on with the story, because now Andy has tried to rebuild the library, make it better than what it is. He's writing letters. He's also getting into trouble. He's just acting out in his own way, in a harmless kind of way, just locking a guard in the bathroom, putting the loudspeaker on, and putting on a vinyl of two Italian women singing, which at that point for the rest of the prison is probably the most beautiful thing that they've ever heard. So he takes a slap on the wrist for that. We do see a new prisoner come in, a younger gentleman who's been to every kind of prison in New England. And he decides, this is going to be my new project. This young man doesn't have an education. I'm going to set him up with a GED. He does so. And in the process of finally learning what Andy Dufresne did to get put in Shawshank, he was framed for murder. And this young kid knows Andy's predicament because in a previous prison, he was actually jailed with the murderer that Andy got framed with. Decides to decides to tell the warden of Andy's predicament. Andy is immediately thrown into solitary for a very long time, which we can actually get into right now with the warden. The warden in this movie, I would honestly classify as a paladin being the bad guy in a D&D campaign. Now, paladins are usually supposed to be good-natured people, but just have possibly wrong kind of means to justify their ends. In this situation, we do see that the warden here is a man of God and tries to use that to his advantage, at the very least with all the other prisoners. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. There's one magical way that it doesn't work towards the end that I will lead up to. And I'll be honest, the warden is a bit of a prick. He really is. He's a very scared man who likes to use the word of God as his crutch. And I think, again, beautifully acted. Love it. But that's just my personal take on him. The warden has the young man killed because Andy has been the warden's taxman, accountant for illicit activities. And if anything happens to that, Andy goes away, and that's a possible loose end, and the warden could go away and be in prison in his own prison, which is a lovely slice of irony that we all would love. But that's not going to happen. It's at this point now, after the young man has been killed, that I feel Andy does come to the realization of, I'm done. I need to get out of here. At this point, he's been in prison for 19 years, 20 years, something along that. There is a moment in the movie where Red approaches Andy, and it's a bit of a come to Jesus moment in the fact that Red is worried that Andy is going to pull a Brooks and possibly end himself. And Andy is just a little more energetic. His personality is changed a little bit. He's a little more manic. That's a better word. He's a little manic for him anyway. And he starts talking to Red about if he were to be out of here, if his parole came up, where would you go? What would you do? I know exactly where I would go. I'd go to Mexico. I'd live my life over there. I could use the help of a man who knows how to get things. And Red just straight up says, Andy, I don't know if I could do that. I may be institutionalized myself. And the one thing that Andy always has throughout this entire movie, he never gives up hope. He gives this in the form of a harmonica to Red. And I feel like in the one scene where he does give it late at night, just for a moment, Red does play the harmonica a little weakly, but it does also show that even Red, who said, no, don't ever have hope. Hope is just going to get crushed. For Red to play that for just a moment does show that deep down, of course, he has hope. And that's a beautiful thing to have. By the end of the movie, we find Andy has pulled the escape of a lifetime, has managed to escape Shawshank. This is where a lot of the memes come through, a lot of callbacks, a lot of references come through of him crawling through the grave, crawling through the pipe to get to the end. And by the end of the movie, Andy and Red are reunited. Red, of course, being let out on parole and making his way down to where Andy now is in Mexico. Final thoughts on the movie. Like I said, Shawshank is one of my favorite movies of all time. Top 10, top 15. It's also a movie that deserves to be recognized and probably recognized more. I understand that, and it has been recognized. There's so many callbacks to this movie through parodies, just from storytelling perspectives. This is, I believe, the movie where people started saying Morgan Freeman is probably the perfect narrator and is also the voice of God. Obviously, that came from Bruce Almighty, but at the same time, this certainly helped with that. And I feel, in terms of being on the 100 bucket list, definitely earns its spot on this list. So that was the first one. So we got about 99 more to come up with. And as a true D&D nerd, gonna roll some dice and we'll find out what happens next time. Oh. Wait till next time. Until then, roll credits. I'm out.